Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, online, thisweekinamerica.us. Thank you for joining us on the program today. August 10th, 1901, two English ladies decided to visit the Palace of Versailles for what started out as an ordinary day of sightseeing. However, on that fateful day, a series of mysterious encounters occurred. When the ladies visited Queen Marie Antoinette's small chateau, both were convinced they stepped back in time to the 18th century. One of the ladies even believed she had witnessed the Queen herself. Were their encounters a case of mistaken identity and confusion, or did they unknowingly step back in time to walk along the paths from a bygone era at Versailles? The mystery explored in the fascinating, thoroughly researched book, The Mysterious Palace of Versailles by Mark Lamont, and he joins us from Tokyo on This Week in America. Mark, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me on your show.
This is a fascinating story. I mean, it really is, and I'm really looking forward to having the chance to talk to you about this. I mentioned thoroughly researched. It's a fascinating book. Books available at bookventure.com in the bookstore, available at Amazon. We'll give you that information as the program continues. Let's go back to that date that I mentioned, August 10th of 1901. Talk about what happened on that day that still has people to this day talking about it.
Yes, well, that's part of the reason why I became interested in it, because it is one of those mysteries that really hasn't ever gone away. It's still persisted within psychical literature, or I should say within parapsychology literature. And basically, the two women decided to visit Versailles on an unplanned visit. And while they were there, they decided to go to Queen Marie Antoinette's Petit Trianon, which the Queen used as a private retreat to escape from the main palace. And they didn't go through to the main exit. They took a by road, if you like, and went through a set of gates which led in a roundabout way to the main, or the small Trianon Palace. And along the way, they met about 8 figures or persons. And they also had unaccountable emotions, for example, a feeling of depression or oppression. And later, they didn't discuss anything about it when they finished their visit. They found the Trianon Palace. And then later, they talked about it when Miss Mobley, who was one of the ladies, was writing a letter back to England. And they started talking briefly about their experiences about a week later. And they both felt that the Petit Trianon was haunted. And it wasn't until about 3 months later in 1901, late November 1901, when the topic was raised between the ladies, Miss Mobley and Miss Jourdain. And then the discovery was made that one of the ladies, Miss Jourdain, did not see a lady sitting near the Trianon Palace. And confronted with this mystery, they decided to write out separate accounts. And then they discovered that both of them had perceived different things at times. Sometimes they saw things together and sometimes later. Anyway, so basically their research started to evolve, and they came to the conclusion that they had basically stepped back in time to the 18th century, that they'd somehow tuned into Queen Marie Antoinette's memory, or an imprint of her memory, when on the 10th of August, which in French history was the day that the Parisian mob stormed the Tuileries Palace in Paris, where the royal family was held captive during the French Revolution. And basically, the French monarchy was overthrown on that day, and they had gone to the Versailles in 1901 on the anniversary of that day. So they believed they'd tuned into Marie Antoinette's active memory, as they called it in their book, An Adventure, and that they had somehow seen and experienced the things that she actually experienced on that day. On the last day that she was at the Trianon, which is believed to be October 5th, 1789. So they believed that the trigger was the date of the 10th of August. And so basically, when they published their book called An Adventure in 1911, it became a sensation because nothing had really ever been written like that before or presented to the public. But it still has its controversies, and so I've been trying. The purpose of my book is to look at the claims the lady have made and try to, untangle a lot of the myths and fantasies that have been associated with those claims.
Yes, It's a very objective look at it. We're talking about the book, The Mysterious Paths of Versailles. Mark Lamont, our guest on the program. The book's available at bookventure.com in the bookstore. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. What really gives this story credibility is the ladies. We're talking about both of these were what educators. One was a principal, one was a vice principal at a very reputable school. So these people carried some credibility when they were telling their story, didn't they?
Yes, that's right. And I think in those days as well, you've got to remember in 1901, before the Great War, social status, especially in countries like England, had a huge impact. You didn't question people of a certain level. And certainly that in itself, I think, has given most of the story its integrity, even right up to the present day. I mean, Miss Mobley, her father was the Bishop of Salisbury, and Miss Jourdain was one of the first women to actually go for a degree or get a degree in Oxford, which when it was admitted, when it was opened up to women. And her father was also a country vicar. So yes, I think that in itself also has given the story integrity. And they were in a social circle mixing with very educated people, very high-level people. So I think a lot of people, even their critics, that question that thought, well, why would these two women put their, would put their reputations on the line? Although they did write for the first 3 editions, the book An Adventure, which was the book that they published their experiences, came out in 5 editions. It wasn't until the 4th edition that the authors' real names were revealed. So they did kind of protect a little bit of their reputations. But anyway, but I think the real crux or the real bulk of my book is actually looking at, is it true? Are the paranormal encounters true? And that's what I've really tried to focus on, looking at the pros and cons of what the women have presented to the world, but really trying to focus, does the paranormal exist? And I think in the latter part of my book, I really do explore that issue, which I feel to a certain extent, a lot of people do have theories about it, but is it true? Is it really true? Can we really interact with the deceased?
Well, the book is an excellent read. It's The Mysterious Paths of Versailles. Mark Lamont coming to us via Skype from Tokyo, our guest on the program. And there is an actual name for the phenomenon that they claim to experience, retrocognition. Talk about this because it actually has a name.
Yes, that's right. Yes, retrocognition. So a lot of people use the misleading word time slip, which I actually don't like to use, but even in psychical literature it's used. But basically, retrocognition means, it does not mean that a person has been physically transported back in time. It's just a term that's been given to a phenomenon which is not understood, that a person sees the past in the present. So it's called retrocognition, or you could say a retrocognitive haunting, which a person or person sees images, scenes from the past in the present. So there's not actually any physical time travel. I think that's really, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it hasn't been empirically proven. So that's basically what this lady's adventure comes under, the 1901 adventure is categorized as.
It's interesting how you came about this. What I understand, a little over 25 years ago, you actually stumbled across the story. You were reading a book about unsolved mysteries, and you read this story. What was it about the story that captured your attention? You didn't plan on writing a book right away, but you planned on looking into it. What was it about this that fascinated you?
Well, I think it was just the idea of stepping back in time.
Yes.
Really, as I said, there are not really many cases of retrocognition on record. We have got a few, but certainly in 1901, or certainly even 25 years ago, it really was a kind of a very small phenomena, or small part of what we consider to be paranormal phenomena. And also, I think just the link to historical personages, such as Queen Marie Antoinette, and I just think the subject matter in itself was very unique. So I think I subconsciously retained that. It was only a very small page that I read in one of those silly books of unsolved mysteries about werewolves and witches and whatnot. Not that I'm really into that thing, but I will say I have got some of them in my collection of books. But I think it just subconsciously I retained it in my memory. And when I came across the ladies' actual book, which they published called An Adventure, and I came across the first edition on eBay, thank goodness for the internet.
Yes.
There was no internet back 25 years ago. And actually, 25 years ago, I did try and purchase a copy of their book, but, again, no internet, and it was out of print. So I think it was just when I got the chance to read it, and I wanted to believe what they said. And it really just started off as personal, private research, which just became bigger and bigger over time. And I was, people who kind of knew about it kind of stimulated me or tried to get me to publish it, or said, oh, you should, it's really interesting, so why don't you just present it and write about it? So that's what I did.
What's interesting is you went into the book, obviously, with no preconceived conclusion or notions, and you present the rational and supernormal explanations. Talk about going into it almost like a scientist, where you're going in and you're looking at this and trying to see if it holds up to the scientific test.
Believe it or not, it never really started like that. Actually, I wanted to believe the lady's explanation, so I went in it. I started it with actually defending the ladies and their adventure. So it's been a real journey, though. But when you really look into psychical literature, or literature about parapsychology and certain cases, when you really, really look at the evidence, and that's what I really have tried to do with my book, the evidence is not always there. So, or the evidence for survival or bodily death, in my opinion, my personal opinion, it really is lacking. But it's fascinating, and I think it's that mystery and the probabilities and possibilities of such an occurrence and interaction with phenomena we call the paranormal, which is the most interesting part. And I certainly hope that people or readers of the book will find that when they're actually reading it.
The book is called The Mysterious Paths of Versailles. Mark Lamont, our guest in the program, coming to us from Tokyo. The book is available at bookventure.com in the bookstore. Of course, at Amazon, and you can link on directly to information on the book by going to our website, which is thisweekinamerica.us. As you're looking through all of the possibilities, is it a real possibility that they did journey back in time? Do you think that was what they thought had happened to them?
Well, I don't, as I pointed out before, I don't personally believe they physically journeyed back in time, but I have pointed out in my conclusion, which I will not, which of course I will leave the readers in a little bit of suspense.
Yes.
But I have pointed out there are 4 points in their written accounts, in their very first written accounts. Actually, they wrote 2 sets of accounts, which also created controversy to their stories. And the second accounts, the originals, they later destroyed, quite foolishly, really. So that's also added to the controversy of the case. But I have focused mainly on, of course, I disseminate both sets of accounts that the ladies wrote of this experience, but I've really tried to focus in on the original set of accounts, the first written accounts, and I believe there are 4 points in those accounts which may infer some kind of paranormal intervention. So I want to keep an open mind to the whole affair. I don't believe that these 2 women were so foolish to believe that they had walked. Some theories believe that and I discuss that in my book, that they stumbled into a fancy dress party or some kind of costume party, which I also discuss in the book. But, I just don't believe that everything that even their most severest critics have said against this case is not without its letdowns, if you like. So I've really tried to, as I said, untangle the web of this whole case and present it in its entirety, the pros and cons, the criticisms, and mainly trying to explore the possibilities of such a phenomenon as retrocognition. So.
Their book is called An Adventure, which they wrote in 1911, and you said what basically you went on was your own adventure in the research and the writing for this. Talk about the research, because it was extensive. You broke down what they said by going back historically and looking to see how accurate these facts were.
Yes, that's right. I did try as much as possible to go to first-hand archived materials, and thank goodness for the internet, as I keep saying.
Yes, for all of us.
Yes, well, I think a lot of the information would have been quite difficult to get a hold of. But yes, but the research process was most likely, or sorry, most definitely the most important or time-consuming part of it. And as I said, it wasn't really, I did believe the lady's adventure when I first started it, but it wasn't until I started looking into the issues, and then one book led to reading another book, and another book, mentioned another book. So it was really quite it wasn't just books about the lady's adventure, but it was about certain facets of parapsychology and retrocognition and even philosophy to a certain extent. So it was a real kind of a jigsaw puzzle, which I tried to then all bring together and make that as readable as possible. And also, of course, apply what I'd read and the research that I'd done back to the ladies' adventure, including, of course, the archival materials that the ladies themselves actually looked at, and also their critics looked at and used against them in some cases.
It is an excellent read. It's a fascinating book, The Mysterious Paths of Versailles. Mark Lamont, our guest on the program. Book is available wherever books are sold, and you'll find it in the Bookventure bookstore. We'll guide you there. It's also at Amazon. Link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. As I'm reading through this, I'm thinking, right, wrong, whatever. The fun is sort of in contemplating the possibilities. Is that part of the fascination with this? It gets our mind expanded a little bit, and we're thinking about what's possible.
That's right. Yes, I totally agree, and I think that's the whole fascination, I suppose, that I had with the case in the beginning, and also the book itself. I've tried to. Well, I have written it. Every chapter is its own chapter. It's not just an analysis of the lady's adventure, as it's been called, the famous 1901 Versailles adventure, or the famous adventure of 1901 at Versailles. I've tried to really analyze each facet of what the ladies claim, and so each chapter in itself is its own little chapter, and you must keep, in a way, reading through right to the end to kind of find out the end result, so to speak.
What has this book meant to you? All of the time and effort you'd put into this, I'm almost thinking you feel sort of a relationship with Miss Moberly and Miss Jourdain. Do you feel close to them after doing all this research?
Well, I will say Miss Jourdain's pen name was Frances Lamont, so maybe you're linking my name to Miss Jourdain. But yes, I suppose it is. I don't really look at them. Of course, I'm not related to them in any way, but I kind of look at them as I look at them as kind of brave women to a certain extent. They were heavily criticized and not unjustly in some cases, but I think they were quite brave at the same time. So to present such a thing in such a time in 1901 or in 1911 when the book was released. So yes, I kind of feel some kind of affinity to the ladies, and probably more to their courage to actually to present what they did to the world. And I think it's only fair that, as I mentioned right at the beginning, this adventure has never gone away. It's always been mentioned from time to time in psychical literature, and even on the internet I've seen it categorized as a classic case of a time slip, which, although it's not specifically true, I think in itself it's achieved this level of recognition, which is not altogether been disproven or proven. So, and even with my book, I still insist on keeping an open mind, because I don't believe that we really do have the true answers in our present time for what we consider to be the paranormal. But as you mentioned, the possibilities of such an occurrence is what fascinates me, and I'm sure what fascinates a lot of people. So that's what I basically tried to do, is to present the information. Here it is. What do you believe? But I've also tried to present and give accurate information to provide a thought-provoking, to make readers think and hopefully provide thought-provoking ideas.
And you do that in the book Mysterious Paths of Versailles. A couple of minutes in the program with the author Mark Lamont. It's interesting. You take unexplained events, and oftentimes, in fact, you talk about this in the book, and you've talked about it in interviews, you find out that there are rational explanations. Are we too quick sometimes to bypass the rational explanations and we want to believe?
Yes, we are. I think just as human beings, we all, I think generally in most cultures, and I'm not certainly not going to get into a discussion of religion or whatever, but I think we don't want to live in a mundane world. I mean, we want to create, we want to explore, and I think, yes, definitely, well, not everyone, of course, but generally people, I think, do jump to the wrong conclusions. But then that's all a part of our social upbringing, our education, our cultural beliefs. I mean, I will tell you an experience of mine actually during my research. Now, I went to one part of the book. I went to the Queen Mary, the RMS Queen Mary, the ship that's in Long Island, in Los Angeles. Sorry, not Long Island. That's in New York. Long Beach.
Long Beach, California, yes.
Long Beach, California, yes, my mistake. But anyway, and I went on a small tour. It was only, I think there were only 6 people, myself, a Japanese person, and 3 German tourists, on a very small tour of the first class area of the ship. Now, in that tour, people, the tour guide said, we went to the first class smoking room, and he was telling us about, how there were servants at the door, and they pressed the buzzer, the passengers pressed the buzzer, and then the servants came in. Well, after that, we could explore the ship however we wanted. So I went with a friend, and we got a bit lost, and we ended up in the outer doors of the first class smoking room. Now, as I went forward, I felt a presence, if you like, step in front of me to block my way. But I thought it was pointless. So of course, I went forward and tested the doors, hoping to get in and find a way out. But they were locked, and so I went back the same way. But my point is that what I experienced, was it subjective? Probably it was, because I had knowledge. The tour guide had told me that there were servants waiting outside the door to admit people, and they pushed buzzers, and then they opened the doors and they came through. So, was it some subconscious kind of knowledge that I already had, that it just externalized itself in the right spot into what could be interpreted as a paranormal event? Now, of course, other people could interpret that as, oh, no, you must have experienced a paranormal event. But I think we really do need to look at subjective factors here and rational explanations before jumping to conclusions. And again, that's what I've really stressed in the book. And I've tried to make it an interesting read and not pushing the subject into any fixed idea. And I hope it will be a far more interesting read than just forcing people to believe in certain things. But yes, going back to your original question, I definitely agree. The average person does just jump to sometimes irrational conclusions, and especially people thinking, oh, I've seen something strange or experienced something strange, and someone else has seen it, that it must be true. But in actual fact, we need to know a lot more about the people who are making these claims. And I've also stressed that in the book. And also I've done an analysis of the 2 authors as well, and their backgrounds to shed more light on who are these ladies, and why should we believe them? So, and I think not just them, but for any person who makes a claim about the paranormal. But of course, I'm not saying that those people have never had a paranormal experience. I'm just saying we should keep an open mind, look at the rational factors involved here before jumping to any hasty conclusions. And I think the ladies, unfortunately, did that in parts of their book. And yes, so I think that, in a way, maybe let down their cause.
It's a very readable book, and it's an exploration not only of that event back August 10th of 1901, but as you hear Mark talk, into our minds as well. Our minds can take us in strange places, and sometimes we misinterpret exactly what's occurring. It's an excellent book. It's called The Mysterious Paths of Versailles. The author is Mark Lamont. You'll find the book at bookventure.com in the bookstore. It's available, of course, at Amazon, and you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and get information on the book. Mark, it is a fascinating story, highly readable, highly entertaining, thought-provoking as well. I know it's real late at night in Tokyo when you're talking to us. Thank you so much for sharing the story with us on the program. A pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And it was definitely a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. The book again, Mysterious Paths of Versailles. The author is Mark Lamont, available at bookventure.com in the bookstore. And you'll find all that information at the website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back after these messages.